Risk becomes real only when it meets an unprepared operator, which is why this lesson shifts us from identifying dangers to engineering defenses. You now know where your vulnerabilities live. The next step is building systems that prevent those vulnerabilities from turning into existential threats. Mitigation is not about eliminating uncertainty. It is about shaping it so your company can withstand shocks without losing momentum. These 4 universal strategies will become your default toolkit for navigating volatility in markets, teams, and technology. Assessment tells you what might go wrong, but mitigation determines whether that danger becomes a footnote or a catastrophe. Every business carries unavoidable uncertainty. The goal is not to chase a fantasy of zero risk, but to manage exposure intelligently. You control outcomes by altering probability, reducing impact, shifting responsibility, or consciously absorbing limited downside. None of these can be improvised after a crisis starts. They must be baked into systems early. Once you understand these 4 buckets, you stop reacting and start engineering resilience into your strategy. Avoidance is the decision to refuse a path entirely because its downside could cripple the company. It's the equivalent of stepping away from a deal, a technology, or a market that carries structural volatility you cannot control. You sacrifice potential upside to protect long-term survival, which is often the rational play when the threat is existential. Avoid entering industries where regulation can shut you down overnight, or avoid depending on unproven tech that might collapse under scale. Avoidance is costly in optionality, but invaluable in preventing fatal strategic traps. Probability reduction is the craft of engineering reliability. You build processes that make errors unlikely. Structured hiring prevents talent disasters. QA pipelines reduce customer visible bugs, and permission systems lower the odds of security breaches. These measures don't eliminate failure, but they compress its frequency to manageable levels. This is where discipline management pays dividends. Documentation, checklists, automation, and training all reduce randomness in operations. The companies that dominate markets aren't the luckiest. They're the ones that make luck irrelevant by minimizing avoidable mistakes. When you cannot prevent a failure, you focus on limiting the damage it can cause. Impact reduction turns catastrophic events into temporary disruptions. Backups transform server crashes into recoverable incidents. Cash buffers convert revenue shocks into solvable accounting problems. Redundant suppliers prevent manufacturing stalls when one partner fails. The philosophy is simple. Expect the blow and cushion it before it lands. Don't ask whether something might fail. Assume it will, and design conditions where the failure hurts but never threatens the survival of the business. Transfer shifts the consequences of a rare but severe event to someone structurally positioned to absorb it. Insurance spreads risk across millions of policyholders. Vendors absorb compliance risk you shouldn't carry. Contractual indemnification moves liability away from your balance sheet. Outsourcing high-complexity functions like payroll or cybersecurity can transfer not just workload, but accountability. Use transfer when the downside is too large to self-insure, but too unlikely to justify internal resources. You're paying to turn a potential corporate ending scenario into a manageable invoice. Acceptance is strategic, never passive. It acknowledges that some risks are small, unlikely, or cheap enough to tolerate, because moving fast matters more than protecting against every hypothetical scenario. When you document acceptance, you capture the logic behind the choice and prevent future confusion or blame. You're not pretending the threat doesn't exist. You're declaring that the upside of action outweighs the limited downside. Mature founders know that over-mitigation can quietly kill velocity. Acceptance, used intentionally, preserves momentum where it matters most. Pilots and MVPs let you explore unknown territory without committing full resources. Instead of pouring capital into an unproven idea, you build the smallest functional experiment that reveals whether customers care. This shrinks exposure dramatically while generating real-world data. A test landing page, a mock-up demo, or a limited regional rollout can reveal fatal flaws long before major investment. Pilots convert massive strategic gambles into priced-in experiments. They don't just reduce financial risk, they accelerate learning while preserving agility. Concentration multiplies vulnerability. Diversification distributes it. A revenue base dominated by one client, a supply chain hinged on one vendor, or marketing dependent on a single platform makes the business structurally fragile. Diversification reduces the blast radius of unexpected shocks. More clients, more channels, more redundancy in critical roles. It's not about chasing variety, it's about engineering stability. When one pillar collapses, diversified companies wobble but stay upright. Concentrated companies fall. The difference isn't intelligence, it's architecture. Here's the distilled version of everything we covered. Risk cannot be eliminated, but it can be controlled through deliberate design. Avoid what can kill you, reduce the likelihood of operational failure, soften the impact of inevitable shocks, transfer catastrophic downside, and consciously accept calculated exposure. With this toolkit, uncertainty becomes manageable instead of threatening. Our next step tackles a subtler danger: misinformation. In a world loud with experts, influencers, and AI outputs, we'll build a filter that separates signal from noise, so you act only on trustworthy guidance.